Hello, everyone, and welcome to our joint webinar with the IRS. My name is Sarah Campbell. I'm USDA's Beginning Farmer and Rancher Coordinator, and I'm also helping lead our Taxpayer Education and Asset Protection Initiative effort here at USDA. So you can find all the information about that on farmers.gov/taxes. But we have partnered with a variety of experts in the ag and tax space and ag tax space to make sure that farmers and ranchers understand the important relationship between USDA programs and their taxes and their assets. And this month we are focusing on scam and fraud prevention, as well as additional resources that are available to help folks navigate the tax liability that might be associated with their program payments. And we have partnered with the TAS office, the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate at the IRS, to offer 2 webinars this month. Right now, we are doing, this is part 1 of the webinars, and it'll be available on farmers.gov/taxes. These webinars are being recorded. These slides and all of the materials will be available online once we caption them and transcribe them. So you will be able to access these materials later. But we are here to talk to you about the resources that the IRS has for low-income taxpayers. And I realize for some folks, maybe this isn't applicable because you have a business and some of those resources don't apply for or aren't available to businesses. But if you are somebody who is no longer farming, or you received a payment related to something prior with USDA and you don't have business expenses to write down, or you've recently retired, some of these resources might be available to you. And there's also a bunch of other great information in this that we want folks to be aware of, and other resources that you may be able to avail yourself of, not necessarily connected to just preparing your taxes. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Doralisa Saldana and Benjamin Schering from the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate to introduce themselves and share some great information with you all today.
Hey, thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon. I'm Ben Schering, and I work as part of the TAS, Taxpayer Advocate Service Attorney Advisor Group. Prior to joining the Taxpayer Advocate Service Attorney Advisor Group, I worked in TAS for several years as a local taxpayer advocate for Nebraska, where I managed a team of advocates that worked with taxpayers to resolve their tax issues with the IRS, among other things. And as mentioned, joining me today as a panelist is my colleague in the Taxpayer Advocate Service, Doralisa Saldana. If she'd just like to take a moment to introduce herself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Doralisa Saldana. I'm with the Taxpayer Advocate Service, the Office of Systemic Advocacy, and I am a management and program analyst. Really appreciate all of you having us this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Doralisa. And yes, thank you for inviting us. We're excited to cover some great material today. Before we get too far into detail, there's one other person from the Taxpayer Advocate Service we thought we should introduce you to, and that's our leader, the National Taxpayer Advocate, Erin Collins. Erin was appointed as the National Taxpayer Advocate in March of 2020. She has over 35 years of experience in handling tax controversy issues at all levels of the IRS, and as well as representing domestic and foreign businesses and corporations on a wide range of tax-related legal issues. So we wanted to start there and share that we have strong leadership at the top to fuel our advocacy efforts. So what we're going to do is talk about the Taxpayer Advocate Service. We're going to get into the who we are, the what we do, and the what we can do for you as we go through this presentation today. First, we want to start just a little bit about the Taxpayer Advocate Service. The Taxpayer Advocate Service is part of the IRS, or the Internal Revenue Service, but TAS is an independent organization, and that stems from the Internal Revenue Service Restructuring and Reform Act of 1998 that amended the Internal Revenue Code and essentially created the position of the National Taxpayer Advocate held by Ms. Collins, as mentioned a moment ago. And it also strengthened TAS as an organization by making it independent. So that independence is critical to what we do in our operations. TAS provides free services to all eligible taxpayers, and we'll cover what eligible and eligibility entails in a moment. But first, I want to highlight what taxpayers means. Taxpayers includes individual taxpayers, business taxpayers, retired taxpayers, exempt organizations. Taxpayers is sort of all-encompassing when it comes to that. The services that TAS provides are free, and there are no income limits for eligibility. So again, we come back to that word taxpayers. If you're a taxpayer and you meet our eligibility criteria, which does not include any income limits, you may be eligible for our assistance. So TAS is, the law rather, identifies, the required functions of the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate or the Taxpayer Advocate Service. And those required functions are to assist taxpayers in resolving their tax problems with the IRS, identify areas in which taxpayers have problems in dealing with the IRS, to the extent it's possible, internally proposing changes to the administrative practices of the IRS to mitigate problems and other issues impacting taxpayers. And then something that I help work on quite a bit in my role as an attorney advisor is identifying potential legislative changes to mitigate such problems. And of course, TAS does all of these legal requirements and functions, and in doing so takes it very seriously. And we're going to discuss how we do some of this as we go forward, but it really breaks down to two functions that we refer to as case advocacy and systemic advocacy. And then we work with the IRS directly with regard to administrative changes, and then make legislative recommendations to Congress through our annual reports that we're required to file. TAS is across the entire nation. It's nationwide. By law, we're required to have a local taxpayer advocate in office in every state. Some states, based on population size, taxpayer issues, geographic considerations, have more than one office. For example, California, New Mexico, or I'm sorry, New York, some of those areas. The Office of the National Taxpayer Advocate, of course, is headquartered in Washington, D.C. So now we've kind of covered a little bit about who TAS is. And I think it's important to know, what does TAS do? We do a lot of things, but I'm going to try to boil it down into a couple easy to understand bullets here. The first, protect taxpayer rights. And you see there it says TBOR, T-B-O-R. That's an acronym for Taxpayer Bill of Rights. We're going to cover that on the next slide. But we protect taxpayer rights by striving to ensure that all taxpayers are treated fairly under the law, and that they know and understand their rights as taxpayers, which are also codified into the law. And we also help taxpayers where system failed to operate as intended, or efforts have failed to resolve the problem or dispute within the IRS. So I mentioned the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Looks a little something like this. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights is codified into law, into the Internal Revenue Code, and all IRS employees are responsible for being familiar with and following these rights. pardon me, there are 10 fundamental taxpayer rights, and those basic fundamental taxpayer rights are the right to be informed, to quality service, pay no more than the correct amount of tax due, challenge the IRS's position and be heard, appeal an IRS decision in an independent forum, to finality, to privacy, to confidentiality, to retain representation, and then to a fair and just tax system. Each of these rights is further defined in our website. I think we even provide some examples on how they may apply and what to watch for. But the bottom line is that taxpayers, and for any tax professionals on the line, your clients, have rights when dealing with the IRS, should know their rights, understand them, and if need be, work with TAS to help ensure that those rights are protected. A couple times I think we've mentioned the Taxpayer Advocate Service works directly with Congress in a way by submitting annual reports as required by law each year. The National Taxpayer Advocate delivers these reports directly to Congress with no prior review or comment from the IRS, Secretary of the Treasury, or any other oversight board. The annual report itself consists of an analysis of what the national taxpayer has identified as the 10 most serious problems impacting taxpayers for that year. In addition, the annual report released each December includes those administrative recommendations for the IRS as well as legislative recommendations for Congress to help address and mitigate problems. TAS also submits an objectives report each June that describes the goals, activities, and those types of things that the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate has planned for the upcoming fiscal year. And of course, you can find those links on our website, and also, on our website. My apologies. Speaking of our website, our TAS website has really gone through a lot of development and has a wealth of information, self-help information on many tax-related topics. We provide step-by-step instructions on how to work through the problem with the IRS. The website is designed really to help taxpayers and tax professionals alike, and parts of it are also available in other languages such as Spanish. It's even viewable on mobile devices. So we're trying to keep up with the needs of taxpayers. As you can see here, there's a main screen. It's got get help, our reports to Congress, contact us, all sorts of important stuff in there. One of our self-help tools that we felt it was important to highlight, it's really neat and it's interactive, is our taxpayer roadmap. And anytime you get a notice from the IRS, you file your tax return, there's a whole roadmap that the tax return can follow. And along the way, it can make stops at different stations, so to speak. This does not show all of the roadmap, but just a small portion of it. But the neat part of it is, if you receive an IRS notice, we have incorporated many of those into the roadmap. So there's a place on the site to enter the IRS notice number you received, hit search, and oftentimes it will populate the letter and give you some information on it. So that's definitely a great way to at least maybe try to get an update, figure out what's going on, and stay stay in the know on your tax issues. So when should somebody, or when could someone come to the Taxpayer Advocate Service for tax account help? In general, it's a good idea to contact the Taxpayer Advocate Service when you're experiencing financial, economic hardship, or you have an immediate threat of adverse action. You're not able to resolve the issue through normal IRS channels. You've tried to contact the IRS, but you've either not received a response within a reasonable amount of time, or the IRS hasn't responded by the date promised. For example, you get a response that says, we'll be back to you in 90 days. 90 days comes and goes. That would be sort of an example there. Sometimes there's just a situation where the facts and issues and circumstances of the taxpayer are unique. And maybe the IRS is trying to apply a one-size-all approach that doesn't really fit or recognize the unique situation of the taxpayer. And that's where, you know, the Taxpayer Advocate Service can step in and get involved. Oops. Clearly, I'm not an expert on navigating the slides here. There are different ways to contact us for help. Using the Can TAS Help Me tool, faxing in the publication, or I'm sorry, grabbing the publication and faxing us, calling the National Taxpayer Advocate case line, or filing the form 911 with your local Taxpayer Advocate Service office. We've got a new tool available. This online tool can help you see if you may qualify for our assistance on a tax account issue simply by going online on our website and answering a few questions. It's on our contact page. You scroll down until you see the tool and go from there. So now we know how to get who TAS is, how to get in contact with TAS, a little bit about working with the Taxpayer Advocate Service on a tax account issue. What you need to know is the Taxpayer Advocate Service, our mission is to advocate on the taxpayer's behalf. So that's what we will do. Essentially, TAS will step in and serve as your voice at the IRS. If a case is opened, after review for eligibility, it gets assigned to an advocate, and that advocate will handle the case from inception to conclusion. Usually, in our normal operating procedures, when we receive a request for services, contact is generally made within 7 days, or we do strive for less, from the date that the contact was made or the referral was sent over, whichever way it makes its way over to us. Sometimes we can give you an expectation as far as when the Taxpayer Advocate Service feels, with everything operating the way it should, that the issue could be resolved. One thing we do make sure that we are able to provide each and every time is a next contact date. And that's really important because it keeps the taxpayer and the advocate involved in the case connected with a regular expectation on when updates may occur, and knowing that they have that contact to reach out to. Then finally, the taxpayer will be provided with a clear, complete, and correct explanation of what was done to resolve the problem when everything is finished. We all know taxation and tax law is a complicated area full of complex jargon that often isn't easy to decipher, and that's something that we do pride ourselves on here in TAS, is making sure that the taxpayer understands kind of the who, what, where, when, why, how, and hopefully how not to have it happen again. I believe with that, we will move on here. We did just have want to note rather, we've got on our website a how we have helped others section, and this just is chock full of impactful and meaningful success stories where our advocates have helped taxpayers with tax account issues, and oftentimes resulting in a major impact in the taxpayer's life and current circumstances. So with that, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Doralisa, to talk to us about systemic advocacy and some more great information on the resources available through the Taxpayer Advocate Service and our programs. Take it away,
Thank you,
Doralisa.
Ben. Thank you, Ben. Okay, so what is systemic advocacy? The Office of Systemic Advocacy has the responsibility for the Taxpayer Advocate Service programs that address systemic problems within the IRS. By definition, systemic advocacy means identifying and addressing systemic tax problems by analyzing their root cause and recommending corrective action. Systemic advocacy advocates for systemic and procedural change, both reactively and proactively. And systemic advocacy focus on issues that impact multiple taxpayers or a defined group of taxpayers, rather than problems that occur on just a single federal tax return. As you can see on the slide, the web address under irs.gov/SAMS is our systemic advocacy system where you can actually fill out a form, both taxpayers or tax professionals. If you see any issues where there is a systemic tax problem, you see maybe something that can impact others, please feel free to fill out that form. You can also upload documents within that form. And that's something that systemic advocacy will then take a look at and, decide if this is a systemic issue and what type of corrective action we will be taking. And you will get some contact information, as well as usually a phone call letting you know that we are working on the issue and what the outcome will be. Within TAS, we have other TAS programs, one of them being the low-income taxpayer clinics, which are independent from the Internal Revenue Service and TAS. The low-income taxpayer clinics represent individuals whose income is below a certain level and who need to resolve tax problems with the IRS. The clinics can represent taxpayers in audits, appeals, any tax collection disputes, before the IRS and in court. In addition, they can provide information about taxpayer rights and responsibilities in different languages for individuals who speak English as a second language. The services are offered usually free or for a small fee. As you can see, there's more information in regards to whether you can find an LITC clinic near you. That would be within the irs.gov advocate low-income taxpayer clinics webpage. There's also the publication 4134. That's the low-income taxpayer clinic list. That publication is also available online under irs.gov or by calling the IRS. One of the other TAS programs that we have is the Taxpayer Advocacy Panel, also known as TAP. These taxpayers have an opportunity to provide direct input to the IRS through the Taxpayer Advocacy Panel. The TAP is an independent panel of citizen volunteers who listen to taxpayers, identify taxpayer issues, and make suggestions for improving the IRS service and customer satisfaction. You can contact TAP if you'd like more information under improveirs.org. Usually around March or April, TAP will be looking for new members. So if you're interested, please keep your eyes open for those recruitment messages that will be on the TAP website, as well as the Taxpayer Advocate Service website. And we also include some of that information on some of the TAS social media sites. If a taxpayer indicates that they have a visual impairment, we do have additional resources. We have electronic versions of many of the tax forms, as well as the instructions and publications in accessible formats, including Braille, text, large print, and Section 508 compliant. All of the files are available on the accessible forms and publication page on irs.gov. We also have the IRS Alternative Media Center. Taxpayers can call the accessibility helpline with any questions in regards to IRS accessibility services. The staff working on the helpline will not have access to taxpayer account information, so they can't specifically answer tax-related questions, but they can help taxpayers needing help with tax law, refunds, or other account-related issues. And you can visit Let Us Help page on irs.gov for additional information. There's also over the phone interpreter services available to assist our multilingual taxpayers. And you can reach those services on that 833 number. In regards to the IRS multilingual resources, we know that tax information can be hard to understand in any language, and it can be even harder if that information isn't offered in the language that you know best or feel most comfortable with. The IRS is now translating tax resources into more languages, as Ben mentioned. Currently, irs.gov offers basic tax information in English plus 20 other languages. Just look for a listing of the languages near the top of each irs.gov webpage and online tools. Then you can just click on the link for the language that you need. You also find many IRS tax forms, schedules, publications, as well as some of our social media channels in multiple languages. Taxpayer Advocate Service website resources are currently limited to English and Spanish, but we are working towards including some of the other languages as well in the future. And please don't forget about our low-income taxpayer clinics that are also available to represent our low-income individuals who have a tax dispute with the IRS. They provide education and outreach and assist those where English is their second language. Requesting a language preference. The IRS has a new form. It's a 1040 Schedule LEP. Which is a request for change in language preference. And this allows taxpayers to ask for information from the IRS in their preferred language. There are 20 languages that you can choose from besides English. You just complete the form and you can file it with your individual tax return. The form is both available in English and Spanish, and it is also on the IRS Forms and Publications website. If you do e-file your schedule LEP with your tax return, you will not need to file the paper version of this form. Interpreter services. If you can't find the answers to your tax questions in your language or in irs.gov, the IRS can offer you help in more than 350 languages with the support of professional interpreters. The numbers listed on the screen is for assistance in both English and Spanish. And then the other number, the 833 number, that is for any assistance with other languages. The IRS can also provide an interpreter using over-the-phone interpreter, known as OPI services, for most of its taxpayer-facing functions, including in the taxpayer assistance centers, during an in-person IRS examination, when dealing with an IRS representative, discussing tax collections, and also for appeals meetings or conference calls. So if you need an interpreter to help you understand, ask the IRS employee to use the over-the-phone interpreter service option. And that option is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it is free of charge. Remember, as Ben said, the Taxpayer Advocate Service is your voice at the IRS. And if you need any additional information, I know that we've covered a lot today, but if you remember nothing else from our presentations today, remember that you can go to the Taxpayer Advocate website in both English and Spanish for additional information as well as forms. Please help us spread the word. Tell your friends, family, anyone else that you know that might need help with an IRS federal tax related issue to go to our website and see if they qualify for TAS assistance. So with that, we'll open to questions, and I'll turn it over back to Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Doralisa. Yeah, so if there were any questions or items we could try to clarify, we're happy to do so.
Thanks. There's a couple of things. I am wondering if you all could share a little bit more about the, so you talked about the VITA and the LITC clinics, but the tax counseling for the elderly and resources that are the free resources for folks who are older.
Absolutely. So let me take us back to the LITC, which I believe was the first item. So the low-income taxpayer clinics are independent from the Internal Revenue Service and the Taxpayer Advocate Service. They get they're grant funded. And essentially what they do is they represent individuals whose income is below a certain level. But I do want to mention there are exceptions. So, I know a lot of times folks will just feel like, oh, I'm probably, over income, or, if that's the case, we always encourage people to reach out, for taxpayers to reach out and inquire about eligibility, and whether you may not be able to get representation per se. A lot of times you're able to get advice or guidance that can help take care of the issue. And I believe the other item was related to TCE sites, or tax counseling for the elderly sites. Those are a valuable resource that does kind of tie into the voluntary income tax assistance programs that provide free tax preparation services, although the TCE sites are specifically focused on helping individuals, seniors, folks in a certain age category with their tax issues that sometimes can be a little bit different or include a unique circumstance that may not otherwise be present. I hope that addressed the questions on those two items. If not, let me know. And
It did. Thank you. So another question would be, you mentioned that there are some limitations with some of the clinics and the resources. And we at USDA have had a number of producers or folks get, they've gotten 1099-Cs. So for cancellation of debt, I'm wondering if like those types of situations are, if they can leverage some of these resources, or would they need to seek support elsewhere?
I can't say for certain, but I believe those are types of issues that the LITC, the low-income taxpayer clinics, the TCE sites that we mentioned a moment ago, the VITA sites, I believe all of those programs, as well as the Taxpayer Advocate Service, but all of those particular programs are capable of handling such an issue. It is not uncommon. Those types of forms for cancellation of debt, they arrive for other items as well. And so there are steps you can take to kind of work that into your tax return, but then possibly find some relief therein using those resources and the tax experts that they have to get to those answers. But that is certainly an issue that I would encourage folks to take, especially if you've never seen one before or it's causing you great concern. I would take to one of those professionals at those at any of those programs and see if you can get some guidance at a minimum. And I should mention, oftentimes, and I do have background. I was the director of the LITC here in Nebraska for quite a while. And one thing we did try to do is partner with private tax professionals that may be able to potentially do some work that we would otherwise be unable to do ourselves due to certain restrictions. So sometimes they have referrals and other avenues that the taxpayers can take. And generally these programs, or consistently, I should say, these programs, the goal is to get the taxpayer the help they need, whether they can provide it directly or they need to help you try to find someone else who can.
Thanks, Ben. That's really helpful and great to hear. I know for some of the folks who are watching this, they might be looking for somebody with ag expertise or can help them with their ag business, but it's good to know that those clinics can maybe help them with referrals or just still be a resource, even if they can't assist them with the tax prep directly.
And I will say, based on my experience, sometimes just having a resource to answer some questions, clarify something. Earlier I mentioned when you work with our case advocates, you're going to get a clear, comprehensive, correct explanation. And sometimes that's of tremendous value and can enable the taxpayer to either move forward on their own, which is always nice if possible, but take things to the next step if need be. It just really depends. But I, again, just encourage folks to try to take advantage of those resources and what they can offer you. And hopefully it all works out. And if not, the Taxpayer Advocate Service is here, right, Dora, Lisa?
Exactly.
Thank you both. We don't have any more questions in the queue. I guess one question that I would have would be, I know with some of our enrolled members in tribes, there are some different tax laws regarding their income. Are there clinics or resources specifically for those who are impacted by those different tribal tax laws?
Absolutely. So I know during my time with the LITC, I'll start there. There was often the LITCs are operated by one of two types of entities: an academic institution, which would be like a university, a law school, or a legal services organization. And often legal services organizations like a Legal Aid of Nebraska or Legal Aid of wherever, they often have focused programs and projects dedicated to specifically to Native populations and other underserved populations as well that may not get the overwhelming attention as just the general taxpayer may. So I will also speak to the Taxpayer Advocate Service. We have resources and we receive training in order to best be able to serve all of our taxpayers, but also in particular, as I mentioned, underserved citizens, populations, and that includes our Native taxpayers. So there are efforts on that front, and it certainly doesn't create any limitation with accessing programs or services. And in fact, there are and is additional specific information unique to those taxpayers that is designed to be helpful just for them and the unique and tax issues that they might face.
Thank you for that update. That's really helpful information. At this time, we've got no questions in the queue, so I will thank you both for joining us today. This was a really great and helpful overview about the resources that the TAS office has, and I would invite those who are on this call. We've got another webinar this afternoon focused on scam and fraud prevention that I'll have both folks from the IRS and USDA presenting on various ways that you can protect your identity and make sure that you are your information is not being shared in ways that you don't want, and that you're avoiding even scams that are just targeting both taxes and USDA programs related to you and your farm operation. So we hope to see you all there, but just as a reminder, this was recorded. We're going to post this on farmers.gov/taxes. We do regular educational webinars. We upload new materials every month to that website. So look back there and check in for all of those updates. And Ben and Doralisa, we will see you soon this afternoon. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for having us. We're looking forward to it.